Hello everybody, welcome to the next Geography GCSE GeogPod. So the focus of this session is to look at structure in some of your longer marked answers. And through this, we're going to look at the structure of PEEL, P-E-E-L. So the aim of this session in particular is to develop your written exam technique. And as I say, the structure for your answers so you can access the top mark bands for the different variety of questions and really to show off the full depth of your knowledge. Now, questions that you can apply the PEEL structure to are mainly the 6 and the 8 mark questions. You can apply them to the smaller mark questions, the 4 mark questions, for example, but that PEEL is very appropriate for the 6, the 8 mark questions that often need a case study example in paper 1, the Our Natural World, and paper 2, which is the People and Society. So what is PEEL? Now, you've heard us mention it in many lessons before, but let's go over what this actually is, and then we can explore how we put PEEL into practice. So the P stands for point. Now, what you've got to imagine is you see an exam question, and you're structuring that exam question into clear paragraphs. The first thing that you need to do in your first paragraph is make a clear point. Don't faff about. Go straight in there with a clear point statement. So what is the point that you're making or argument you want to make linked to the question? Jump straight in with that point. What you then do with that point is you then fully explain that point. So I always say there's 2 or 3 stages to an explanation. Make your point. Then we'll say, well, why is that happening? How is that happening? Or so what that is happening or taking place? Whatever the question's asking you to do. So you're giving clear reasons. You're developing the point that you clearly stated. What you then should do, this is particular for the 6 and the 8 mark exam questions, is provide evidence for that explanation. Now, this is where I always say bring in an example. So what examples are you including? Add facts, add figures. Now, when I say examples of evidence, that it could be many case studies. It could be larger case studies. But again, you're providing the evidence and example to back up the explanation and the point you've given. Now that will constitute the main part of each paragraph. Then what you must do at the end of each paragraph is link it with a clear sentence back to the question that you are answering to make sure everything is linked back to answering that question. So let's explore a few examples. Now, this was an actual exam question that appeared a few years ago, and it says case study. So it's asking you for a case study of a global example of a sustainable management in either the Arctic or Antarctic. So here is what the exam board have provided as a particular example of a well-developed idea. Now, those words in bold, well-developed, come from the top band of the mark scheme. Now, this is one of the paragraphs for this 6 mark question. So bear in mind, this is one paragraph only. Now, let's have a look to see where this person is using PEEL to answer the question in this particular paragraph. So what I've done here is highlight in the same color as the point, the yellow, the parts of the paragraph where they're making a point. So they say here the Antarctic Treaty has been mostly successful at sustainably managing the Antarctica. So they've gone straight in with a point. What they then have done, as you can see here, is explain that point. The treaty has helped to preserve the pristine nature of the area. Clear expansion of the point. Now, what they've then done very craftily is they've given some evidence as to how it's doing that. So the example is by banning drilling for oil, dumping nuclear waste, and military conflict. Flora and fauna are also protected by banning hunting of seals and whales, protecting the whole food chain. So they've given the evidence, the example as to how the Antarctic Treaty is preserving the natural environment. So they've backed it up with that evidence. What they've then done They've said it is not totally successful as the treaty cannot protect the Antarctica from the impact of climate change. So that's where the assess part of the question comes in. So they've clearly linked it back to the question. So you can see the yellow point, the purple explanation, the blue evidence example, and the green link back to the question. So let's have a look at this example. And this was from last year, where a student had written in a mock exam this particular answer to this question, which was 6 marks again. Evaluate the importance of the UK's role in one example of a global conflict. So again, let's break this down. Where have they made the point here? It's quite a long point. The global conflict I will be talking about is the Ukraine-Russian conflict in 2013. Straight in there with a statement and point. They've actually given the example as well. The Ukraine is located in Eastern Europe and is a landlocked country. So what they've done there is they've given some place detail to that point. What they've then done is the explanation. Here, what they've gone into detail is what the UK have done to help in that conflict. So the UK helped in the conflict, and in the Ukraine, they're part of NATO, it goes on to explain. And what they've done is they've used that to go into a bit of depth of explanation linked to the point they've made. What they then do is this: the way the UK is helping develop. So they're giving precise detail and evidence of an example. And they've used a figure there, using deploying 4,000 troops into the country to help maintain the importance of places and people staying protected. What they've then done, because the question is asking to evaluate, which means you're giving the good and the bad side of it, they've said the bad side of the UK helping is Russia is a superpower, and it created bad tension between the UK and Russia. So that is where they've linked the paragraph back to the question, because they've given an opposing side. They've given a bad side of the UK's involvement in this particular example. So again, a clear point, a brief explanation, clear evidence and example where they've included what the UK is actually doing, and then bringing it back to the question with the evaluation. Now, this one is, I want you to think ahead here, because Peel isn't just appropriate for GCSE geography answers. This is actually still going to follow through to A level. Now, here is an example of an 8-mark question at A level. Now, obviously, A level answers are going to be much longer. This is one paragraph. Yep, shocked. One paragraph. It is quite long, answering this question. Using examples, explain why some countries are more globalized than others. You'll study a unit on globalization. 8 marks. Now, 8 marks at A level requires a much more extended answer. This is one paragraph, and have a read. Look at where he's made the point. He's gone straight in there. One way in which some countries are more globalized than others can be due to economic problems or success. Straight in with a point. What he's then done very nicely, and don't worry if you don't quite understand the terminology and explanation here, is he's explained that point in depth. That's the entire purple section there. And you'll see what he hasn't done there is used any evidence, any example case study yet, because he saves that for the next point in blue. There he starts off by saying one example can be seen through China. And he goes into detail on China and what China is doing. He used some facts in there and uses some figures in there. For example, the 400 million Chinese citizens. And then concludes the paragraph with a link statement back to the question. Due to this, it's a good way of starting the last sentence. Due to this, through economic growth, countries can be seen to be more globalized than others who cannot achieve this through debt. So again, it applies to A level. So the more you practice this at GCSE, making your point, explaining it, putting in your evidence example, linking it back to the question, the more prepared you'll be for GCSE and then A level as well. So please do go over different styles of 6 and 8 mark questions at GCSE and geography and start to think, how can I structure each of my paragraphs to include that point, that explanation, the evidence example, and then linking it all back to the question. Keep practicing it, do it a few times, and the more you practice, the better you'll get. Thank you very much, folks.